When I see the Imagine Garden, of course the first thing that I see is a garden. And the garden has these symbols of the different religions, as I mentioned before. It has a beautiful waterfall and a gazebo and places for people to gather. That's the obvious thing about the Imagine Garden, but what I really see when I see the Imagine Garden is that it's a focal point. It's a point toward which a person, people of any religious faith, can focus their intention and their commitment to be in prayer for the world that could be kinder and gentler. And so in addition to being a physical location and actually a series of Imagine Gardens throughout the world is what I foresee. And anybody I've ever explained the vision to starts wanting to explore how can we have an Imagine Garden where we live? How can we use an existing garden? How can we take the elements of our existing garden and put in the elements that would help it qualify as an Imagine Garden? But beyond that, what I see is that it is this focal point because of the prayer, may every mind remember God, may every mind awaken. And what I know from my study in the field of consciousness is that when there is a single focal point and many people are focusing upon it, that there builds a consciousness that in and of itself begins to live and begins to affect people. It becomes like a slogan that people communicate and repeat. So I see that the website for the Imagine Garden is an important factor here. The website for the Imagine Garden will be the place where people can ask their prayers and leave their prayers. And once again, that's a focal point, a place of shared attention. And then gradually, and maybe not even in my lifetime, there'll be one or more teaching centers where people can actually parliament, where they can come together and be teaching each other, having people visit to take classes, be in Congress about these ideas. Here's how we're doing this in my community. Here's how the Imagine Garden has affected my heart, so that these ideas can be shared. And between the physical gardens, which are beautiful, and the World Wide Web, the idea will spread very quickly. And that was one of the things that I realized when I first conceived of the vision of the Imagine Garden. You may not be old enough to remember this, but in the 70s, 2 million of us did a postcard campaign that was addressed to a multinational corporation that we felt was behaving not in a win-win way, that a product was being forwarded in the marketplace that was costing the lives of many infants because of the situation in their homes and in their country. The product was not really viable for being used with these infants. And it took, more than a year, maybe 2 years even, for the 2 million of us to write our little postcards before this corporation reversed itself. Well, now we're dealing with the World Wide Web. And to get the word out to 2 million people can take minutes. And so the presence of the Imagine Garden on the web is a great leveraging point for the intention and prayer of the Imagine Garden. And the intention of the Imagine Garden is that we as a people, as a race, the human race, awaken to our oneness. That beyond the superficial differences that we can see and that we can hear when someone talks about their maybe specific religion or their growing up experience or their finances or their lifestyle or whatever, that beyond those differences that we're far more the same than we are different. And so part of the purpose, the holy purpose to me of the Imagine Garden is for more and more people to awaken to their oneness. And it doesn't take everybody doing this, it just takes a critical mass. It just takes a certain number of people who say, yeah, I could do this. I could spend a few minutes in prayer every day. Yeah, I could do this. I could forward this email attachment. I could talk with my botanic garden and see how we can dedicate an area to an imagined garden. I can send the URL for the garden on to my friends and say, well, what do you think about this? And within days, millions of people would be reached. And perhaps within days, millions of people would be enrolled in praying the prayer, may every mind remember God. And if you happen to be Buddhist, you might say, may every mind awaken. Because being a Buddhist, you're not deistic. But the prayer of the garden is such that anyone can absorb it and then express it in their own belief, in their own way of thinking. It's the entire concept and all of the elements of the garden are very reverential toward all people. That there's an increasing knowing within me and within many people that diversity is part of our richness of human capital. That the diversities are here for a blessing. And that as we learn how to honor each other and to interface with each other in a way that invites exploration and common ground and common understanding, that we can create a reality on this beautiful garden that is called planet Earth, that is unlike anything we've seen before. And another aspect of that is that it's not just about religious tolerance or religious acceptance. Think about when someone is really remembering God, they're kinder to children, they're kinder to their spouse, they're kinder to the person in the elevator and the person in the checkout line. And I have heard people say, well, those people who flew the planes into the towers, they thought they were remembering God. Now, I'm not an expert on religion, but I know that when people are remembering God, that they display a certain spirit. So if I were a Christian person, which I'm not, I would say, well, when a person is remembering God, they would remember different choices, and their behavior would resemble the fruits of the Spirit. They would be kind, and they would be merciful, and they would be gentle. If I were a Muslim person, and I'm not, when I would say Allah, that my whole heart and my mind is turned toward Allah, then when I'm remembering Allah, what I know is that Allah is the breath that breathes me, and it breathes you also. So I remember that we're just one. And so it's so much more than just tolerating each other. It's receiving and then living from the gifts that are our own spiritual tradition and being grateful to the other. That the living of the tradition is done with a slightly different point of view, that variation, that texture is actually part of our richness, our wealth.